The kingdom of Eldrith lay in the quiet embrace of twilight, where the sky bled gold into violet, and the forests whispered old secrets. Castle Aeloria rose from the cliffs like a crown carved in stone, its towers piercing the heavens, its windows glowing with the fire of countless torches. It was a kingdom ruled by strength, by fear, and by the indomitable will of its alpha king, Aelric. Aelric strode through the marble halls, his presence commanding every eye, every whisper, to fall silent. He was tall, his hair dark as raven wings, his eyes sharp and calculating. To the people, he was a king, a warrior unmatched, and a ruler unyielding. To the court, he was a storm wrapped in grace. Yet beneath the armor of authority, a thread of something else lingered, hidden even from himself, a bond he had long neglected, a bond with Leora, his fated mate. Leora waited in the western woods, where the silver rivers reflected the sky, and the trees bent in reverence to her quiet strength. She had sent a message hours ago, a call whispered on the winds and carried through magic, urgent and pleading. She had discovered signs of a curse, one tied to Aelric's bloodline, a shadow that could unravel the kingdom and sever the bond between them forever. But Aelric, lost in the shimmer of the festival, had ignored it. The festival in the castle's great hall sparkled with lanterns that hung like stars. Nobles in flowing silks and embroidered robes danced beneath the chandeliers. Musicians played with fervor, the music rising like the heartbeat of the night. Aelric moved among them, a predator in human form, yet his steps were light, his smile a mask of charm. And then he saw her. Seraphine, a visiting noblewoman of exquisite beauty, her hair a cascade of golden light, her laughter ringing like bells. The court hushed as Aelric approached. He offered a smile, and she returned it, warm and inviting. In the quiet of the hall, away from the watchful eyes of courtiers, their hands brushed. Aelric leaned closer, drawn to the thrill of danger and desire. The kiss came, sudden and consuming, a spark that seemed to ignite the very air. For a moment, he forgot everything, the kingdom, the festival, even the message that had arrived hours before. Far in the western woods, Leora's hand shook as she clutched her satchel, the wind carrying her voice toward the castle. "Aelric," she whispered, her voice trembling with both fear and hope. The magical thread of her message, delicate and shimmering, reached the castle walls and fell silent, unnoticed. The kiss ended, and Aelric straightened, his mind alight with the thrill of the moment, unaware of the storm gathering beyond the castle walls. Seraphine's eyes sparkled, and for the first time in a long while, Aelric allowed himself to feel something fragile, something alive. Meanwhile, the forest stirred. Shadows lengthened, and the wind carried whispers that were older than the castle, older than the king himself. Leora's path took her deeper into the woods, toward the heart where the curse pulsed like a living thing. Every step was heavier than the last, each breath a struggle against the creeping magic that sought to claim her. She paused beside an ancient oak, its roots like twisted hands gripping the earth. There, etched in the bark, were markings only she could read, warnings from a past long forgotten. The curse was waking. It had felt her mate's neglect, and it was feeding on it. Her heart ached, not only from the danger, but from the knowledge that Aelric had chosen to ignore her call. He did not know, and perhaps he never would, how much she had risked to warn him. Yet still, she pressed on, through thickets and shadowed glens, driven by love that refused to bend. Back in the castle, the festival raged on. Aelric stood on a balcony overlooking the courtyard, a glass of wine in hand. The moon cast silver across the stones, and the wind carried faint echoes of laughter. Seraphine leaned close, her hand brushing his arm, and Aelric felt again that intoxicating pull. He did not hear the whisper of the wind that carried Leora's final call. Hours passed, the night deepened. Leora finally reached a clearing where the curse's presence was strongest. The air shimmered with a strange energy, and shadows coalesced into forms both beautiful and terrifying. She stepped forward, determined to confront the darkness. The shadows whispered her name, twisting her fears into visions. She saw herself alone, her strength fading, her mate turning to another, the kingdom falling into ruin. She faltered, the magical force pressing against her chest, threatening to consume her entirely. And yet, even in that moment of despair, she reached for Aelric. Her love was not blind, but resilient. She called out, with all the power she could summon, sending a final, desperate plea toward the castle. Aelric, hear me. Please. The message traveled through the night like a silver thread, glimmering with magic and hope. But in the great hall, Aelric laughed with Seraphine, unaware of the danger, unaware that the woman who had risked everything for him was on the brink of being lost. As Leora collapsed to her knees, exhausted and wounded by the curse's force, the forest fell silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath, as if the world itself waited for Aelric to finally hear. And far above, in the highest tower of Castle Aeloria, a single torch flickered against the darkness. Aelric's eyes, sharp and commanding, scanned the horizon, but he did not see the glimmer of the silver thread, the final message of his mate. The night swallowed Leora's voice, and her fate hung in balance, fragile as a candle in the wind. The kingdom slept unaware, but the shadows whispered of reckoning, of bonds broken, and the price of neglect. And somewhere, deep within the heart of the castle, a pulse of magic stirred, waiting for the king to awaken, for the mate he had ignored, and for the darkness that would not be denied. The Alpha King had not yet seen the cost of his choice. And Leora's call, the last of its kind, drifted through the night, unanswered. The first light of dawn crept across Eldrith, pale and trembling. The kingdom slept, unaware of the dangers that stirred both in the shadows of the castle and the depths of the western woods. Castle Aeloria, usually proud and commanding, seemed unusually still, as though it too felt the absence of something vital. Aelric awoke in his private chamber, the night's festivities a fading echo in his mind. His body remembered the warmth of Seraphine's hand, the thrill of her closeness. But a shadow lingered in his chest, a whisper he could not yet name. The messages, the urgent calls from Leora, had gone unanswered. And though he did not know it fully, the weight of neglect already pressed against the edges of his mind. The courtiers moved through the halls like ants, speaking in hushed tones of the mate who had disappeared into the woods. Their words were careful, measured, but filled with curiosity and worry. Aelric's brow furrowed. Something was wrong. Something more than mere gossip. He could feel it, the subtle tremor beneath the kingdom's surface. Meanwhile, Leora lay in the heart of the forest, the ancient oak standing sentinel over her. The shadows of the curse had gathered around her like living fog. They whispered lies and fears, visions of betrayal, of loneliness, of a king who did not remember his promise, of a kingdom left to crumble without her guidance. Her chest rose and fell with exhaustion. Her hands, trembling, brushed against the ground, as if seeking strength from the earth itself. She thought of Aelric, not the king, not the Alpha, but the man she had known in the quiet moments before the crown, before the throne. She remembered his touch, warm and steady, his voice soft in the darkness, and a pang of longing cut through the fear. The curse sensed her hesitation. It pressed closer, twisting the air around her, shaping her memories into visions of despair. A spectral version of Aelric appeared before her, cold and unfeeling, his eyes void of recognition. He spoke her name, but it carried no warmth, no love, only accusation, a mirror of the doubt that had taken root in her heart. "You chose another," the specter said. "You left me waiting, and now the world suffers." Leora's voice trembled, yet she stood, refusing to bow to the shadows. "No," she said, "I did not leave. I fight for you, for us, for the kingdom. I will not let this darkness win. The spectral Aelric vanished, leaving only the oppressive quiet of the forest. Leora pressed forward, through roots that clawed at her ankles, through vines that whispered threats. Every step tested her resolve. Her body ached, but her determination burned brighter than exhaustion. At Castle Aeloria, Aelric could no longer ignore the unease gnawing at him. The servants' whispers, the subtle tremor in the castle's air, and the strange silence of the festival's aftermath, all pressed against his pride. He left his chambers, moving through the halls with the authority of a king, but the uncertainty of a man who feels a piece of his life slipping away. He climbed the highest tower, seeking a view of the lands he ruled. The forests stretched endlessly, bathed in the pale gold of dawn. And then, as if carried on the wind itself, a shimmer of silver reached his eyes, a faint glow among the trees. His heart quickened, a pulse of recognition he could not fully understand. Magic, ancient and subtle, moved through the air, and with it, the unmistakable presence of Leora. The realization hit him like a cold wave. She had been calling, pleading, risking herself, and he had ignored her. The weight of guilt pressed down, heavier than any sword or crown. He did not hesitate. Leaving the castle behind, Aelric rode through the awakening kingdom, his horse swift, his mind focused on the mate who had always been more than a companion. Every thought of Seraphine, every fleeting thrill of the night before, vanished in the urgency of his mission. He was a king, yes, but more importantly, he was a mate, and he would not fail again. In the forest, Leora's strength waned. The shadows pressed closer, the air thick with their whispers, and her vision blurred. She stumbled, her hands scraping against roots and stones, her breaths shallow and ragged. She whispered a final plea into the stillness, a name that carried hope and despair in equal measure. Aelric. And then she saw him, a figure moving through the trees, the rising sun catching his silhouette, his eyes sharp and searching, burning with determination. Relief surged through her, mingled with fear. The curse did not yield easily, and the distance between them was measured in moments that could cost her everything. Aelric dismounted, the forest floor beneath him soft and treacherous. He reached for her, his voice carrying across the clearing, strong and unwavering. Leora, hold on. I am here. I will not let you fall. The shadows shrieked, twisting around them, trying to keep them apart. Leora's hand reached toward his, fingers trembling. Their connection, deep and unbreakable, flared with magic, a thread of light in the oppressive darkness. You should have come sooner, she whispered, her voice both accusing and relieved. I know, Aelric said, his hand brushing hers, his eyes dark with remorse. I failed you. I will not fail again. The curse recoiled, sensing the strength of their bond, but it did not retreat entirely. The forest shivered, the shadows gathering into forms that tested their courage. Yet together, they faced it, their hands joined, their hearts beating in unison. Aelric's presence bolstered Leora, his strength and determination weaving with her own courage. She drew from him, and he from her, until the shadows shrank, recoiling from the force of their unity. The forest seemed to breathe with them, acknowledging the power of love tempered by sacrifice. And yet, the curse was not gone. It lingered in the corners of the woods, in the sigh of the wind, in the glint of unseen eyes. It had felt neglect, and though it had met resistance, it would remember. As they rested together, the first real moment of relief since nightfall, Aelric and Leora shared a look that spoke of unspoken promises, of lessons learned in the harshest of ways. They knew the road ahead would be treacherous. The kingdom, the shadows, the legacies of power, all of it demanded vigilance and strength. But they also knew, with a certainty that cut through fear, that they would face it together. The dawn broke fully over Eldrith, gold spilling across the forest and the castle, casting long shadows behind them. Leora leaned against Aelric, her strength returning with each steady heartbeat, and he held her as if the weight of the world rested in that simple act. And yet, even in that fragile peace, a whisper lingered, a warning carried on the morning wind. The shadows had retreated, but they had not vanished. The curse was clever, patient, and it would not forget the moment of weakness it had witnessed. Aelric tightened his grip on Leora's hand, eyes scanning the forest beyond, his mind sharpening with resolve. "No force will take you from me," he vowed, a promise both personal and royal. Leora's lips curved in a faint, weary smile, her eyes reflecting both relief and lingering fear. "I trust you," she whispered, "but we must be ready. The shadows are not finished." Together, they began the journey back to the castle, their steps careful but determined. The path was long, the forest still alive with hidden dangers, but for the first time in many nights, they walked it together, not as king and mate, or ruler and subject, but as equals bound by trust, courage, and love. Yet, as they moved, the wind shifted, carrying a sound that made them both pause. A low, almost imperceptible murmur, like a sigh of ancient power, drifted through the trees. The curse had not disappeared. It waited, patient and cunning, and its next move would be more dangerous than the last. The sun rose higher over Eldrith, spilling light across the kingdom and turning the silver rivers into threads of molten gold. Yet the forest still carried shadows, deep and restless, whispering secrets older than the mountains themselves. Even in the bright morning, the air felt heavy with anticipation. The curse that had haunted Leora and Aelric lingered, patient and calculating, waiting for the moment to strike again. Aelric led Leora through the forest, his hand never leaving hers. His eyes, sharp and watchful, scanned every tree, every shifting shadow. Though the danger was unseen, it was palpable, an invisible weight, pressing on their bond and testing their resolve. He could feel the consequences of his neglect, and it tightened his chest with guilt. But he would not falter again. Not now, not ever. Leora walked beside him, her body still weary but her spirit unwavering. The first trial had strengthened her in ways she could barely explain. She had faced the darkness alone, felt the weight of the kingdom's fate on her shoulders, and survived. Yet the curse was clever. It did not vanish with courage alone. It remembered, and it would return. As they reached the heart of the forest, the air grew colder, the light dimmer. The trees seemed to twist and lean closer, as if listening, as if waiting. Then it came a presence that was at once both terrifying and beautiful. The shadows gathered into a form that shimmered and shifted, neither entirely human nor entirely spirit. It spoke without words, its voice a chorus of echoes in the mind. "You have defied me," the curse said, though the sound was not a sound but a sensation, vibrating through the air. "Yet your bond is fragile. Can it endure the trials ahead? Can your love withstand the weight of destiny?" Leora's grip on Aelric's hand tightened. "We will endure," she said, her voice firm, carrying a strength that came not from power, but from conviction. "We face this together, always together." Aelric stepped forward, his presence a solid force against the shifting shadows. "You will not harm her," he said, his voice carrying the authority of a king but the sincerity of a mate. "Not while I stand." The curse laughed, a sound that resonated through the forest like cracking ice. The shadows swirled around them, forming illusions of fear, visions of the kingdom in flames, of Aelric turning away, of Leora lost forever. Each vision was vivid, each one designed to break their spirits. But they stood firm. Leora's courage, and Aelric's resolve intertwined, forming a bond that the shadows could not sever. They moved as one, their steps in harmony, their hearts beating with the rhythm of trust and shared purpose. The illusions faltered under the weight of their unity. "You must understand," the curse said, its voice lower now, almost a whisper. "That power alone will not save you. You must confront yourselves, your fears, your failures. Only then can you hope to survive." Aelric looked at Leora, seeing not just his mate, but the reflection of his own failings and pride. He remembered the moment he had ignored her call, the kiss that had distracted him, and the agony that her absence had caused. His chest tightened with regret, but he knew that remorse alone was not enough. Action was required. "I was wrong," he admitted aloud, the words trembling but true. "I failed you. I neglected the bond that is sacred to both of us. But I will not fail again. Not now. Not ever." Leora's eyes softened, reflecting both her relief and her own lingering fear. "We cannot undo the past," she said, "but we can shape the future together." Undo. The curse surged, sensing the change within them. It struck with greater force, twisting the forest around them, sending roots and shadows like spears toward their hearts. The air shimmered with dark energy, and the ground beneath them trembled. Aelric moved with the precision of a warrior, shielding Leora, deflecting the attacks with both strength and strategy. She followed his lead, her own courage radiating outward, creating a circle of light in which the shadows faltered. Their bond was no longer passive. It was a force of nature, a living connection that the curse could not easily break. In the midst of the chaos, Leora raised her voice, chanting an ancient phrase she had discovered in her studies of the kingdom's lore. The words carried magic, a resonance that called upon the protective spirits of Eldrith. Light burst from her palms, weaving through the shadows, weaving through Aelric's strength, until the forest was filled with radiance that made the darkness recoil. The curse screamed not in words, but in a vibration that shook the leaves and rattled the branches. It had underestimated the power of their unity, the depth of trust and love that bound them. Slowly, inexorably, it began to dissipate, scattering into the wind, like smoke blown from a fire. When silence returned to the forest, it was complete and profound. The oppressive weight had lifted. The first rays of true sunlight broke through the canopy, bathing Leora and Aelric in warmth and gold. For a moment, the world felt still, as if acknowledging their triumph. Aelric lowered himself beside Leora, his hand brushing her hair back from her face. "You were brave," he said softly, his voice full of awe and gratitude. "Braver than I ever imagined. You saved us both." Leora smiled, tired but unbroken. "We saved each other," she replied. "I could not have done this without you." They rose together, their hands intertwined, and began the journey back to Castle Eloria. The forest was no longer hostile. The shadows had receded, leaving behind a path illuminated by both sunlight and magic. They moved with a quiet reverence, knowing that the trials they had faced were only the beginning of what their kingdom and their bond would demand. As they neared the edge of the woods, Aelric paused, looking back at the trees that had tested them so fiercely. His voice low and thoughtful. "It will remember the strength we found here, and it will also remember the cost of our neglect. We must remain vigilant." Leora nodded. "And we will," she said. "Together, we will face whatever comes, not as king and mate, but as equals, as partners, as hearts bound in trust and love." The castle came into view, rising above the hills like a sentinel watching over the kingdom. The torches flickered in welcome, and the people stirred as their rulers returned. Aelric's steps were measured, deliberate, each one a promise to the kingdom and to Leora. Inside the great hall, the courtiers fell silent, sensing the change that had occurred. Aelric and Leora moved through the hall, not with the distant authority of king and subject, but with the quiet strength of unity. They exchanged no words beyond what was necessary, for their bond spoke louder than any proclamation. In the private chambers, as they stood together looking out over the lands, Aelric took Leora's hands in his own. "I vow," he said, "that no call will go unanswered again, no plea ignored. I am yours, wholly, and I will protect our bond, our love, and our kingdom with everything I am." Leora's eyes shone, reflecting both relief and lingering fear. "Through shadow, through trial, through all the days to come, our bond is stronger than the darkness that seeks to undo it." The sun rose fully, bathing the kingdom in light and warmth. Eldrith had survived the night, survived the trials, and in the quiet aftermath, the Alpha King and his mate stood together, transformed by the ordeal. The curse had tested them, the shadows had tried to break them, but their courage, trust, and love had prevailed. And yet, even in this victory, a faint wind stirred, carrying with it whispers of distant shadows, of challenges yet unseen, and of the constant reminder that vigilance and unity were the truest forms of strength. Aelric and Leora remained at the castle's highest tower, hands entwined, eyes scanning the horizon. They had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, but they knew the world was never truly safe. Only together could they meet its trials. Only together could they defend the kingdom and their hearts. In the warmth of the sun and the quiet strength of their bond, they found redemption, not in power or conquest, but in understanding, trust, and love. The Alpha King had learned the cost of neglect. The mate he had ignored had shown the strength of patience, courage, and resilience. And together, they faced the future, ready for whatever shadows might return.